Sophia Carter's hands moved with the kind of precision that only years of training could produce, her fingers adjusting the scope of a custom hunting rifle with smooth familiarity. The mountain air around her was crisp and clear, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. The sun was still low but climbing, painting the valley in a soft golden glow. This was her sanctuary, her place of balance, her world away from the battles that once defined her. At 34 years old, Sophia had lived through more violence than most would ever imagine. She had served 3 tours overseas as an army sniper, a role that required patience, discipline, and an unshakable calm under fire. But those years had also left her scarred, both in ways visible and invisible. Coming home had not been easy. Civilian life often felt foreign, loud with trivialities and yet strangely empty. She had built this range with her husband Michael as a bridge between the life she had lived and the life she wanted to create. Here she found peace in the steady rhythm of marksmanship. The range itself was a testament to their effort, carved into a natural valley with earthen berms rising 30 feet high on 3 sides. It was quiet and safe, perfect for the practice of long-distance shooting. Sophia and Michael had spent countless weekends pouring sweat into its construction, hauling timber for benches, stacking stone for stability, hammering and measuring until it became more than a project. It became a retreat, a place where memories of war could be reshaped into something constructive. Sophia had risen before dawn as usual, slipping out of bed while Michael still slept, making her way to the range in the cold gray light. She always preferred early mornings. The still air provided the best conditions, no gusts to push bullets off course, no shifting mirages from the heat of the day. She set up targets at 100 yards, simple black bullseyes against white paper. Yet to her they represented more than circles and ink. They were symbols of control, of discipline, of mastering chaos. The rifle she worked on that morning was not hers. It belonged to Dr. Robert Walker, a local surgeon with a passion for hunting but a recurring frustration with accuracy. Sophia had already modified the trigger group and bedded the action, improving its consistency. Now she was here to zero the scope, adjusting and refining until the weapon performed as though it were an extension of its shooter. She took a deep breath, loaded 3 rounds, and fired, each shot cracking across the valley, the sound echoing against the walls of earth before fading into silence. The process was almost meditative. Measure the spread, adjust the turret, repeat, each click precise, methodical, reassuring. Sophia had learned long ago that precision was not merely a matter of steady hands. It was the sum of every detail: wind direction, air density, angle of elevation, the hidden math of ballistics wrapped in muscle memory and instinct. She respected the responsibility of every trigger pull, knowing too well that bullets could both save and destroy. Her phone buzzed, interrupting the calm. She glanced down to see a message from Michael: 3 hikers missing on Eagle Ridge. Search teams mobilizing. Sophia frowned, her eyes lifting to the towering ridge above her range. The rugged mountain face was notorious for sudden weather changes and confusing trails. Even experienced hikers sometimes lost their way. Just last month, a man had fallen into a ravine and was not found for 3 days. Sophia set down the rifle, instinctively reaching for her binoculars. Through the glass, she scanned the tree line and rocky slopes. The elevation rose nearly 800 feet from her position to the summit. On clear days, she often spotted hikers moving along the trail, tiny figures dwarfed by the immensity of pine and granite. It was one of the reasons she loved this spot. Isolated yet alive with distant glimpses of human presence. As she lowered the binoculars, her phone buzzed again, this time a news alert: a family of 4 missing on the popular Sunset Vista Trail. Sophia felt a knot form in her stomach. Families with children on such rugged paths always worried her. The mountains were beautiful but unforgiving. One wrong turn could mean hours of confusion. One slip of the foot could mean tragedy. She returned to her rifle, determined to finish Robert's gun before the sun climbed higher. Once heat shimmer set in, accuracy would suffer. She adjusted the bipod, settled into position, and let her breathing steady. Yet just as she was about to fire another group, something flickered in her peripheral vision: movement on the ridge. Sophia's instincts sharpened instantly. She lowered the rifle and reached for her spotting scope, sliding its powerful lens toward the source of the motion. What she saw stole the air from her lungs. Two figures moving erratically through the tree line, their bodies hunched, their direction cutting away from the established trail. It was not the pace of hikers, it was the pace of hunters. For a long moment Sophia remained frozen, her trained eyes locked on the figures, her mind cataloging details, the way they scanned the terrain, the way one flanked left while the other angled right, the way their dark clothing blended against shadowed bark. This was not random. This was deliberate. Her heart began to pound as realization crystallized. They were not hunting animals. They were hunting people. She shifted the scope slightly and her breath caught. Just ahead of them, cornered against a cliff edge, was a family, 2 parents and 2 children no older than 8, their bright jackets standing out against the gray stone, their tiny backpacks with cartoon designs almost obscene in contrast to the menace closing in. Sophia's hands trembled as she focused the scope, watching in horror as the predators advanced. The serene morning shattered. The sanctuary she had built threatened by the very violence she had tried to escape, yet her training did not allow paralysis. Already her mind was running calculations. Wind direction northwest, distance roughly 850 yards, elevation angle severe, the conditions brutal for a precision shot, and yet the family had nowhere else to turn. Sophia Carter had not asked for this moment, but fate had brought it to her doorstep. And on Eagle Ridge, the storm was beginning. Sophia kept her eyes pressed to the glass of the spotting scope, her pulse drumming in her ears. The family was pinned against a narrow ledge that jutted from the cliff face. Behind them a drop of at least 200 feet yawned open, jagged rocks waiting far below. The 2 children clung desperately to their mother's hiking jacket, their faces streaked with fear. The father stood between them and the strangers, his arms raised in a futile gesture of defense. The men who had stalked them were no lost wanderers. Sophia could read their posture. The way they moved with purpose. The weapons in their hands told the truth. One carried a long blade that caught the sunlight as it swung. The other gripped a cheap pistol low and steady, finger already resting on the trigger. Their clothes were dark, baseball caps pulled down to hide their eyes. Every detail screamed experience. They were not improvising. They were carrying out a plan. Sophia's stomach tightened. She had seen these movements before in war zones across the world. Not the chaos of amateurs, but the deliberate dance of predators who had done this before, one flanking to cut off escape, the other pressing forward to intimidate and dominate. They knew that help was far away. They knew that in these mountains screams would echo unheard. She adjusted the scope, magnifying the view. She could see the terror on the father's face, a man trying to stay strong for his family, while knowing deep down that he had no control over what was about to happen. His bright blue jacket made him stand out like a beacon. Perhaps that was what had drawn the hunters to them in the first place. Visibility from a distance, a target chosen for ease. The mother pressed her children back against a cliff wall, shielding them with her own body. The little girl cried openly, her small backpack decorated with cartoon animals. The boy tried to look brave, but his lower lip trembled. His small fists clenched around the straps of his pack. Sophia felt her throat constrict. She had seen children in war zones, children caught in violence that was never theirs to bear. But this was home soil. This was a peaceful Saturday morning in the mountains of her own country, and still the same darkness stalked innocence. Sophia catalogued the details with a sniper's mind. Distance measured by the scope's markings at 847 yards, wind gusting northwest at about 8 miles per hour, an elevation change of nearly 300 feet. She knew the bullet would drop almost 8 feet across that distance. Wind would drift it several inches. Uphill angle would complicate the math further. She had the knowledge. She had the experience. But she did not yet have the decision. For what she was about to attempt bordered on the impossible. The father's voice carried faintly across the valley, offering his wallet, his keys, anything, his arms still raised. The plea of a man bargaining with wolves. Sophia did not need to hear every word to know the outcome. She could see it in the eyes of the armed men. This was not about robbery. This was about elimination, about silence, about making sure there were no witnesses to tell a story. The gunman lifted his pistol and aimed directly at the father's chest. The machete wielder moved closer to the mother and children, gesturing toward the edge. Sophia could see it all play out. the false promise of surrender followed by slaughter. Bodies pushed into the ravine to vanish into broken stone and dead trees. Her hands trembled as she reached for her rifle, not Robert's hunting weapon, but her own, the one she trusted with her life. A custom-built 308 Winchester. She knew every quirk of it, every detail of its behavior. She had loaded the rounds herself, selecting 168 grain bullets and matching them with precise powder charges. She knew their trajectory. She knew their consistency. This was her tool, her lifeline, and now it might be the only chance for the family. She steadied herself, inhaling deeply, pushing back the wave of adrenaline that threatened to overwhelm her. She could not afford panic. Not here, not now. The family had seconds, perhaps half a minute before their fate was sealed. The machete wielder barked words that carried even across the distance, his tone sharp, commanding, telling his partner to hurry, to finish it. The gunman pressed his pistol closer to the father's head, the metal touching his temple. Sophia's mind screamed, too close, no margin for error. If she aimed for center mass, she risked hitting the innocent man. If she tried for the head, the same danger remained. The only chance was the weapon itself, a target the size of a fist, moving slightly in the trembling hands of a killer, 847 yards away, uphill, through gusting wind. Sophia shifted her scope, her crosshairs sliding onto the wrist of the gunman, just above the grip of the pistol. She knew it was madness, a shot people wrote into fiction, not reality. Yet she had made shots before in combat zones where failure meant her own death, or the death of those she protected. Her body remembered what her mind doubted. The machete wielder suddenly grabbed the little girl by her arm, yanking her away from her mother. The child screamed, high-pitched and raw. The sound carried across the valley like a knife. Sophia's vision blurred with rage and protective instinct. Every hesitation burned away in that instant. These were not faceless enemies in some far land. They were men threatening children within sight of her sanctuary. She adjusted her aim again, her breathing slowing, her body falling into the rhythm drilled into her years before. Inhale, exhale halfway, hold, squeeze, each movement deliberate, each thought focused. The rifle was steady beneath her, the scope clear, the reticle sharp. She whispered to herself without even realizing it, not as prayer or plea, but as focus. The family's time had run out. The predators were seconds from ending it, and Sophia Carter, whether she wanted the title or not, had become the only line between life and death. The impossible shot had to be made. Sophia's finger rested lightly on the trigger, the rifle steady against her shoulder. She had tuned this weapon herself, adjusted every screw, polished every surface, built it into a tool that responded like an extension of her own body. Now all of that knowledge, all of that history, came down to one breath and one bullet. The valley stretched between her and the ledge, nearly 9 football fields of air, slope, and wind. In combat she had made long shots, shots where the math had to be done in seconds, but this was different. The stakes were children, a mother clutching them desperately, a father kneeling with steel pressed to his temple. Sophia knew there was no room for doubt. She checked her calculations again. The bullet would take over a second to reach the target. In that second, anything could happen. A sudden shift of wind, a twitch of the gunman's hand, a stumble of the father. She adjusted her elevation turret, holding higher than felt natural, allowing for a drop of nearly 8 feet. She adjusted her windage, holding a fraction left, compensating for the invisible push of air. Through the scope, she watched the machete wielder pacing like a caged beast, his grip on the little girl unrelenting, her small body dangling as she sobbed. The boy pressed into his mother's side, the mother whispering words of comfort through her own terror, the father's blood dripping from the wound already inflicted, the pistol steady against his skull. Sophia's world narrowed. The noise of the forest faded. The warmth of the sun became irrelevant. Even her own pounding heart felt distant. All that remained was the reticle of the scope and the small patch of skin just above the gunman's grip. She needed him to shift slightly, to pull the pistol far enough from the father's temple that she could risk it. The machete wielder barked an order. Hurry up, finish it. The gunman adjusted his stance, his hands moving, the pistol lifted just slightly. Enough. Sophia's muscles tightened, not in panic but in control. Years of discipline flowing back like muscle memory, her breathing slowed to a calm rhythm. Inhale, exhale halfway, hold, squeeze. The rifle cracked. The sound thundered across the valley, echoing off stone walls and scattering through pine branches. Sophia felt the recoil press into her shoulder, a sharp and familiar jolt, her eye never leaving the scope. Her bullet, a 168-grain projectile she had hand-loaded with care, sliced through the air at supersonic speed. 1.2 seconds, that was the eternity it took. In that time, Sophia watched as if reality slowed. The father's eyes squeezed shut in grim resignation. The mother's mouth opened in a silent scream. The machete wielder jerked the girl's arm with cruel impatience, and the gunman began to press his finger against the trigger of his pistol. The bullet struck, a burst of energy exploding against metal and flesh. The pistol shattered in the gunman's hand, fragments spraying like shrapnel. His scream tore through the stillness as blood sprayed across the rock. He stumbled backward, clutching what remained of his fingers, the weapon now nothing but broken steel. Chaos erupted. The machete wielder froze in disbelief, his confidence fractured by the impossible. His partner writhed on the ground, blood pooling, moaning in agony. The family remained frozen in shock, their lives saved yet their minds not yet able to comprehend it. Sophia worked the bolt of her rifle with practiced speed, the metallic click and slide a reassurance that she was not finished. Chambering another round, she steadied her breathing, eyes scanning the ledge. The machete wielder looked out across the valley, his gaze sweeping the slopes below, confusion etched on his face. Never in his life had he imagined death could reach from so far away. He grabbed at his wounded partner, dragging him toward the trail, panic overriding his predatory swagger. Sophia kept her crosshairs locked, debating whether to fire again. But her goal had never been vengeance, only survival for the family. She let them retreat, knowing fear would do the rest. The wounded man staggered a few steps before collapsing against a tree, his blood staining bark and stone. The machete wielder cursed and abandoned him, fleeing into the forest with the desperation of a hunted animal. Sophia tracked him through her scope, her finger on the trigger, ready if he turned back toward the family, but his direction was clear. He was running from a ghost sniper. He could not fight. On the ledge, the family remained crouched, paralyzed by shock, the father trembling, the mother clutching both children as though to fuse them into her body. The boy's wide eyes scanned the forest, as if waiting for another monster to appear. The girl buried her face in her mother's chest, her sobs carrying faintly on the breeze. Sophia exhaled slowly, her body steady though her heart hammered inside her chest. She had made the shot, the kind of shot people called impossible, the kind of shot that decided not just skill but fate itself. She had destroyed the weapon without killing the man. She had created confusion enough to save the family's lives. But they were not yet safe. She knew the machete wielder could regroup, could return with greater rage. She knew panic could drive the wounded man to one last desperate act. She reached for the public address system wired to the range, her voice about to cut across the valley, a lifeline of sound to guide the family to safety. Before she could speak, she fired 2 more warning shots into the air, the sound cracking like thunder, driving the fleeing attacker deeper into the forest. Then she lifted the microphone, her voice strong, military calm. Follow the sound of my voice. You are safe. Move left toward the white markings on the trees. Take the narrow trail down. I will meet you. The father lifted his head, searching for the source, his body shaking. He pointed and spoke to his wife. The family began to move slowly, unsteady but alive. They supported one another, taking each step as if the ground itself could vanish, their children clinging between them. Sophia grabbed her emergency kit and ran toward the base of the trail, her boots crunching against gravel, her lungs pulling air that tasted sharp with adrenaline. She had faced battlefields, but never had she felt the weight of responsibility as heavy as in this moment. She had saved them from death, but she had to bring them home. At last she saw them emerging from the trees, their shapes ragged, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling from exhaustion and fear. The father's jacket soaked in blood, the mother's face wet with tears, the children clinging to her side like shadows. Sophia slowed, her voice gentle. You are safe now. Come to me. The mother fell to her knees, pulling her children into her arms. The father leaned against a rock, gasping, alive but stunned. The impossible shot had given them another chance at life. And for Sophia Carter, the storm had only just begun. The family stumbled into Sophia's range like survivors washed ashore from a storm, the father bleeding from his forehead, the mother trembling but clinging to her children with unbreakable strength, the children wide-eyed and silent now, drained from terror. Sophia dropped her rifle onto a bench, rushing forward with her medical kit, her training shifting from precision shooting to battlefield medicine. "You are safe," she told them, her voice steady though her chest still heaved from the sprint. "Sit down. Let me see the wound." The father tried to speak, but his voice faltered. His hands shook uncontrollably. Sophia pressed him gently onto a chair, inspecting the gash across his forehead. It was deep but not fatal. She cleaned it with antiseptic, bandaging it with swift movements born of repetition, her own hands steady even as the memory of the cliff top lingered in her mind. The mother whispered her name, Emma Johnson, her voice cracking with relief. Her husband John, and their 2 children, Tyler and little Emma. They had only wanted a simple hike, a family day together in the mountains. Her words broke into sobs. "We thought we were going to die. We thought they would kill the children." Sophia pressed her shoulder gently. "You are safe now. Hold on to that. The danger is past." In the distance, sirens began to echo faintly through the valley, growing closer. Someone must have reported the gunshots, or perhaps another hiker had seen shadows moving on the ridge. Within minutes, the sound multiplied. Vehicles climbing the mountain road, a helicopter roaring overhead, dust rising as emergency responders converged. The still valley transformed into a scene of flashing lights and radio chatter. Sheriff's deputies spilled from their cruisers, paramedics carrying gear, search and rescue teams moving with disciplined urgency. Sophia raised her hands calmly, stepping away from her rifle. "I am the one who fired," she called out. "The attackers ambushed this family. I intervened. One man is wounded. Another fled into the woods." Detective Maria Santos, a veteran officer with sharp eyes and years of crime behind her, strode forward, her gaze scanning Sophia, the rifle, the wounded family. She raised a hand to halt the deputies from swarming, her tone firm. "Ma'am, put the weapon down and step aside." Sophia nodded, placing the rifle on the bench with the bolt open, her palms empty. The detective's eyes swept toward the ridge. "You are telling me you made that shot from here?" "All the way up there," Sophia answered without hesitation. 847 yards, uphill, wind out of the northwest. "My background is military, former sniper." The detective's expression tightened, not disbelief, but calculation. She understood the impossibility of the shot, and yet the evidence lay in the shattered pistol fragments up on the ledge. Paramedics tended to John's wound, cleaning and stitching under the flashing lights, the children wrapped in emergency blankets, Emma clinging to a stuffed toy offered by a deputy, their tiny forms a heartbreaking reminder of what had nearly been lost. Sophia stood to the side, her heart heavy with both relief and exhaustion. She had pulled them from the jaws of death, but the story was no longer hers alone. Word spread quickly. Deputies captured the wounded gunman less than 2 miles down the road, his mangled hand bandaged in bloody rags, his voice incoherent, ranting about ghost snipers and impossible bullets. The machete wielder was hunted through the forest by dogs and helicopters, his flight leaving a trail of torn clothing and broken branches. Hours later, he was dragged from beneath a picnic table at a distant trailhead, still clutching his blade with shaking hands. Their plan unraveled under questioning. They admitted to watching hikers for weeks, studying families who seemed easy prey. They confessed to 3 other disappearances, hikers who had never returned, families written off as lost to accidents. Sophia's intervention had shattered a pattern that might have continued for years. Her shot had not only saved John, Emma, and their children, it had exposed predators who would have kept killing. By nightfall, the valley swarmed with news crews, bright lights and satellite trucks filling the gravel lot outside the range. Sophia Carter, a woman who only wanted peace and routine, became the center of a story that spread across the nation. Headlines screamed about the impossible shot, the sniper angel, the guardian on the mountain. Cameras shoved toward her as she tried to walk to her workshop, questions firing like bullets. How did you do it? What were you thinking, do you consider yourself a hero? Sophia tugged her baseball cap low, pushing past them. She had faced gunfire, but the relentless pursuit of attention felt like another battlefield. She wanted no fame, no spotlight. She had acted because she could, because no one else was there, but the world demanded a story. The world wanted a symbol. The Johnson family became her fiercest defenders. John appeared on news programs, his head still bandaged, his voice strong, telling anyone who would listen that she had saved their lives. Not just saved, but prevented their murders. Lisa spoke tearfully of watching her daughter being grabbed, her voice cracking as she called Sophia an angel. Their children clung to her during interviews, innocent faces that carried the weight of proof. Experts weighed in. Professors dissected the physics of the shot. Enthusiasts traveled from miles away to stand where Sophia had stood, to aim at the distant ridge and whisper of her skill. Dr. James Mitchell from the university appeared on television, explaining that at such distance the margin for error was essentially zero, that what she had done was marksmanship at the edge of human ability. Politicians called. The governor herself phoned Sophia, her words heavy with ceremony. "The state is proud of you. Your courage saved lives." Sophia listened politely, wishing only to return to quiet mornings on the range, yet invitations flooded in, ceremonies planned, medals promised. But behind the headlines and the crowds, Sophia sat with Michael on their porch, the sun setting behind the peaks, her voice low. "I just want my life back. I did what anyone would have done." Michael wrapped his arm around her shoulders, his reply gentle but firm. "No, you did what only you could have done. That is why they call you a hero, whether you want it or not." The mountains loomed silent, the range quiet once more, yet Sophia knew nothing would ever be the same. The storm had broken, and its echoes would follow her wherever she went. Months passed, yet the echoes of that morning on Eagle Ridge never truly faded. Sophia Carter had not sought fame, yet it had found her all the same, her name spoken in newsrooms, her face splashed across headlines, her story dissected in endless retellings. But behind the noise was the quiet truth. One woman with training and discipline had stood between a family and certain death, and her choice had reshaped not only their lives but her own. The Johnson family never drifted away. They visited Sophia and Michael often, not for shooting lessons at first, but for something far simpler. They wanted to sit with the woman who had saved them, to let their children see her not as a headline but as flesh and blood. Tyler, with his curious eyes, asked endless questions about rifles and distances. Emma preferred to sit beside Sophia at her workbench, fascinated by the tools and the small screws of rifles being cleaned. Sophia smiled at their innocence, a balm to wounds she had carried for years. "You are part of our family now," Lisa told her during one visit. "Whether you like it or not, you're stuck with us." Sophia found that she did not mind at all. In saving them, she had discovered a connection she did not know she had been missing, the bond of shared survival, of gratitude that words could never fully capture. Over time, the range transformed. It was no longer only a place for marksmen. It became a gathering place for people who sought not just skill but safety. Families came wanting to learn the basics of self-reliance. Hikers purchased emergency beacons that Sophia quietly provided through a fund she established, the Sarah Carter Foundation for Hiking Safety, though she resisted her name being used. Her board insisted that her story gave the cause weight. People need real examples, they told her. Not fictional heroes, but real ones who remind us what is possible. Letters poured in from across the country. Families who had lost loved ones in wilderness accidents wrote with gratitude for her mission. Strangers thanked her for inspiring them to take responsibility for their own safety. Hikers carried first aid kits because of her story. Children learned emergency skills because their parents showed them the news article and said, "Remember this woman. She chose to act when others might have looked away." Sophia herself struggled at first. The constant recognition, the ceremonies, the medal placed around her neck by the governor in a hall full of applause. She wore her old uniform at Michael's urging, her ribbons heavy across her chest, the words of politicians calling her the very best of the state, the applause thunderous, but her eyes sought only the Johnson family in the front row, Lisa's tears, John's proud nod, Tyler holding a drawing of Sophia with angel wings, Emma clutching a stuffed toy she had named Miss Sophia. Those were the only rewards that mattered. Detective Santos remained in touch, her respect clear. You stopped a killing spree, she told Sophia during a visit. 3 other families lost before the Johnsons, their files reopened now. Their stories no longer written off as accidents. Sophia carried that knowledge heavily, relief that she had stopped further deaths, grief that she had not been there earlier, but she accepted that fate had placed her where she was needed at that moment. And that was all anyone could ask. The media eventually moved on, but Sophia's range never returned fully to anonymity. Shooters traveled from far away to stand where she had stood, to attempt shots at the same distance, to whisper of the impossible bullet that shattered a pistol without harming its hostage. Sophia never encouraged them. She reminded every visitor that marksmanship was not about glory, it was about responsibility. It was about knowing when not to shoot, and understanding that a trigger is never pulled lightly. Her relationship with the Johnsons deepened. They called her Aunt Sophia. She attended birthdays. She watched Tyler learn to calculate bullet drop with remarkable accuracy for a child. She watched Emma learn to tinker with the small parts of rifles with the focus of an engineer. She did not push them toward weapons. She taught them responsibility. She reminded them constantly that courage was not about pulling a trigger, but about standing firm when fear tried to take hold. A memorial was placed on Eagle Ridge, honoring the families who had not survived. Sophia hiked there quietly one morning, laying her hand on the plaque. The mountain bathed in morning light just as it had been the day she made the impossible shot. The weight of loss pressed against her, yet there was also peace. She could not undo the past, but she had prevented its repetition, and in doing so had honored those whose lives were cut short. A year later, Sophia sat at her range on another golden morning, the same calm air she had once loved, another rifle across the bench, another day of careful adjustments. Her phone buzzed with a message. A family planning a hiking trip wanted training. They wrote simply, "We want to be ready to help others just like you were." Sophia smiled faintly. The circle had widened. Her choice on that day had planted seeds she could never have imagined. Michael joined her on the porch that evening, the valley painted in amber hues. He looked at her with quiet pride. "You saved more than 4 lives. You changed how people see themselves." Sophia nodded, her voice soft. "I did what I had to do. Nothing more." Michael shook his head. "No. You showed us all what courage looks like." Sophia Carter had never sought to be a hero. She had only wanted peace. Yet fate had drawn her into the storm, her rifle steady, her mind sharp, her heart unwilling to look away. In one impossible moment, she had chosen to act, and because of that choice, children laughed again. A family healed, predators were stopped, and strangers across the country believed in courage once more. The mountains loomed eternal, their ridges fading into twilight. Sophia breathed deeply, the air cool, the valley quiet. She knew the world would move on, but she also knew that somewhere, someday, another family might need someone willing to act, someone who would not look away, and she would be ready. Because sometimes the most ordinary mornings lead to the most extraordinary acts of courage, and sometimes the line between life and death is drawn by a single breath, a single squeeze of the trigger, and the will of one person who refuses to let evil win.